Dear students, we are talking about research, and that too in the context of sociology. In the previous 3 lectures, first I talked about how to identify a research problem, then the methodologies, quantitative, qualitative and mixed methods or triangulation. Then I talked about research design. Now, there are various components of research design, and we will take up some of them one by one, and one of them is the tools of data collection. How do we actually collect the data from the field? And this lecture is devoted to these tools of data collection. It is focused on conceptualization, operationalization and measurement issues. More on primary and secondary data, though we have already little bit talked about this distinction. Strengths and limitations of secondary data, visual data, interview schedules and questionnaires, reverse coding, pilot study for testing the interview schedule or questionnaire, and Google Forms or SurveyMonkey forms. You can actually include many other things in tools of data collection, telephonic interviews, for example, or observations. But to make you familiar with the broad issues in tools of data collection, I think this much discussion should be sufficient, and then you can read the books. Primary data are those which are collected by the researchers themselves or by the teams of researchers. Secondary data are those which are collected by other researchers or other agencies. If I myself conduct a survey of migration in various parts of the country, then my data, whether collected by me only or by a team of investigators to be appointed by me for this purpose, if I have money, if my project is sponsored by ministry, ICSR, CSIR or some other agency or some international agency, that will be primary data. But if I am using national sample survey data on migration, then that data are secondary to me. So, secondary data are those collected by other researchers or agencies, census data, NSSO data, NFHS data, RCS data, DLHS data, annual health survey data, or industrial census, agricultural census data, or data from other countries in which collection I was not involved. They are all secondary data to me. Now, it is not a characteristic of data as such. You see, all data are primary for some and secondary for others. National sample survey data are primary for Registrar General India, secondary to me. NFHS data are primary for IIPS, secondary to me. And if some IIPS faculty is referring to my data or analyzing the data from microfiles of some of my surveys, those data are primary to me and secondary to them. If you are using secondary data, why do we make this distinction? Because if you are using secondary data, you must be aware of their methodologies and definitions. If you are using age data of census, you must know what was the definition of age. Age can be asked in several ways, and you must therefore know what exactly was the question on age in census schedule of the country. You must also know what are various possible errors in the age data, methods and material of demography talks about various types of indices to check whether age data are okay or to what extent age data from censuses are okay, and what can be done if there are errors of age heaping, errors of under enumeration, over enumeration, non-response, and various other types of errors involved in census age data, for which you must correct before you use age data for any demographic or predictive purposes. There are certain strengths and limitations of secondary data. Strength of the secondary data, the biggest strength of secondary data, I would say that it is easily available. I do not have money to collect data on consumption for all India, and why should, even if I have money, why should I waste it when I know that the consumption data are already available from National Sample Survey. I can myself collect data on domestic violence, but when I know that NFHS 4, NFHS 3, they have already collected huge data on domestic violence for all the states of India, physical violence, emotional violence, sexual violence, then why should I not make use of microfiles of these surveys? They are easily available. Then one does not have to spend time and money on the collection of data and just focus on the problem definition, modeling and inferences. What is more important in use of secondary data is the model of consumption, model of domestic violence that I will be using for analyzing these data and drawing inferences. Appropriate statistical techniques or analytical techniques, model fitting techniques, predictive techniques will have to be used on the data which are secondary and collected by others. There are also limitations. The variables and tools are decided by others and you cannot modify them. So, if you think that the question on domestic violence was not appropriate, if you think that data on diseases was not good or comprehensive, maybe they should have included one or two more diseases in which you are more interested than the diseases included in NFHS data. Now, you cannot do it. You can only analyze data which are available in NFHS. You cannot change their questions and you cannot make any modification in them. So, you have to do your modeling or analysis based on what is already available. And you may also not know the degree of error in the data which has crept in due to different reasons, sampling, non-sampling, at various stages of collection, data entry, editing. cleaning of data. You may not sometimes have the full knowledge of measurements, data entry, weights and so many things, and you should try to become more knowledgeable about these matters before you take up data for analysis. There are also forms of visual data apart from numbers and words. Quantitative researchers use numbers, qualitative researchers use words, meanings, interpretations. There is also visual data. Sociologists and ethnographers often show icons, graphs, charts, diagrams, flow charts, models, artworks and photographs of events, individuals, habitats, surroundings, etc., to communicate something. And a single visual selected carefully sometime depicts many of reality. You are, however, not supposed to show pictures unless you have taken permission from your subjects. It should not be random. I am not free to take picture of anybody and everybody in the village setting. As we take consent before collecting data through questionnaires, we also have to take consent before I take a snap of something, somebody or some situation, because this may harm in some indirect manner today or tomorrow interests of somebody. So, I have to be ethical. In one of the studies, situation analysis of HIV/AIDS in Lalitpur, we took some photographs. Now, this photograph shows a 13-year-old boy getting married, and he is being carried on a bicycle. Most of you students who come from urban background may not have seen such a marriage procession. Now, this visual tells many things about rural situations. Why is this man carrying a thali? And perhaps because he is only a 13-year-old boy, he does not know how to use bicycle. So, he is being carried on the carrier of this bicycle, and this another boy is carrying him. You can see in the background so many. You can know about the material of walls of the village houses. You can know about housing environment of the village. So many things. From this simple visual you can see so many things. In the same study we also took help of some boxes. This box, for example, shows misconceptions about use of condom, and you can read them. Actually, they are unfounded, but people's behavior will depend on what they think about something. People's behavior will not depend on what you think about something or what you think about condom. People's behavior will depend on what they think about it. So, these are some misconceptions. Like use of condoms may lead to eczema. It cannot be used as it is so yucky. We know that this is not correct, but if people think about this thing about condom in this way, they are not going to use. Several women developed stomachache after using. So, by making a box containing various misconceptions about the material, we are able to convey why people are not using them, or one of the reasons behind what in technical terms we say unmet needs. Why so much of unmet need in Uttar Pradesh? The unmet need is because there are misconceptions. In the same study, we were supposed to identify vulnerable areas in the district, so that the health department, administration, police, legal authorities concerned with various things which are directly or indirectly linked with HIV transmission can be identified. So, in different areas, this is the map of Lalitpur, and through these circles we are able to show which are the vulnerable points and how vulnerable they are. We can write down the numbers of people engaged in high risk activities, sexual, say female sex workers, IVDUs, intravenous drug users, or which areas are close to say national highways where more accidents occur and people need blood transfusion, or some other ways. This is another visual. I am just showing you how visuals can be used. This is a visual, and in this visual, this is a visual of yoga class in an institution of higher learning. This is open air theatre, and you find that what interesting thing you find in this visual is the gender segregation. We do not, or institutes of higher learning otherwise do not segregate boys and girls in classrooms, in offices, but in yoga activity you can see all the boys sitting here on stairs, all the girls here on the common ground. Somebody can say that there are reasons that it was not so safe to sit on these steps, but then that is also linked to gender biases, that women need more protection than boys. So, this visual is able to say that this yoga class, it's doing a good thing, making students more aware of health requirements and teaching them yoga, but it is also strengthening the gender stereotypes. As a sociologist, if I use this visual, or if I use these data as observation data, in the last lecture I said that there are many ways of collecting ethnographic data, and one of them is simple observations without telling anybody that I am doing any research or anything. I just observe and I just take a photograph, and this is what the visual data would show. The most important tool of data collection in sociology is structured interview schedule. Now, I also find that most of our PhD students or MPhil students find it difficult to prepare an interview schedule. So, I thought that in this lecture I will focus more on do's and don'ts in making interview schedule. A structured interview schedule employs a standard questionnaire or interview schedule to ensure that all respondents are asked exactly the same set of questions in the same sequence. I am not making that typical distinction between questionnaire and schedule, but if you want to know, then conventional sociology said that a structured interview schedule is one which is filled up by the researcher himself or herself, and questionnaires are those which can be distributed or mailed, or these days emailed to respondents or subjects, and they will themselves fill up them. And based on this distinction, some distinction regarding the nature of interview schedules and questionnaires are also suggested. Like questionnaire cannot be used in the illiterate population. They will not be able to read and write, so understand the questionnaire or fill it. Their structured interview schedule or semi-structured interview schedule will have to be used. Structured means fixed choices, Unstructured means open choices, open-ended, and you can also have some questions, some part of the schedule is structured, some part unstructured. Now, some rules: use simple language. I have seen that in over enthusiasm or due to lack of experience, sometimes students think that they should ask a specific question on a specific theoretical point. Like a student interested in racial discrimination may ask a question: do you think that diversity is a good thing in the organization? The term diversity may not be understood by your subjects or respondents in exactly the same way in which you understand it. Or theoretical terms like structuration, gender bias, feminism, complexity, etc., etc., or the typical jargons and complex terms of sociology. Now, you cannot ask your respondent, do you believe in functional theory or conflict theory of poverty? They will not understand it. There are so many meanings of functional theories and conflict theories. You have to ask simple questions which they can answer based on their experience of life. In place of asking whether you will prefer diversity, you can better ask whether you think that an organization should have staff members or employees or students, if it is university or educational institution, from all major communities and castes of the country, or all, why major? Just say all races, religions, communities, castes, or if in that region only two major communities live, Hindu and Muslim. So, you can ask, do you think that an organization which employs both Hindus and Muslims is more successful or is more preferred, or their leaders are more intelligent, more practical than organizations which employ only Hindus or only Muslims. So, the term like diversity is avoided. Use simple language which is understood easily by the people. A questionnaire is not a good tool to ask whether man is rational. Makes no sense, because the meaning of the term rational for people would not be same as for you. Pre-code the responses, that will be better. Means structured interview schedule is better, so that information can be transferred easily to computer. This requires more efforts when designing the interview schedule, but saves lot of time during processing and analysis. Keep a code for unexpected and a fixed code for non-response. Unexpected means others. So, when you give choices, at the end you always have a choice of others, and in bracket you write please specify. These days in NFHS, IIPS made use of tablets, computer tablets, and investigators entered data in those computer tablets at the time they were asking questions, and immediately the data was transferred to the center. So, this is structured. Try to avoid embarrassing or painful questions. About embarrassing or like you should not ask whether you show whole of your income on your income tax return. Do not ask, have you ever engaged yourself in cases of sexual harassment? Or do not ask questions which lead to pain. If you know that somebody had 6 children and at different points of time, some due to diseases, some due to some epidemic, some due to some accident, malnutrition, all of them died, and you ask him to recall, you ask your respondent to recall about circumstances of death of his children, that will be very painful. And what will you do with that kind of data? Try to avoid personal, embarrassing or sensitive data, especially near the beginning of the interview. Sometimes your research topic may be such that okay, some sensitive questions may have to be asked, like in Lalitpur study, integrated district of UNICEF, we had to ask some questions on multiple partnership. It is embarrassing to ask women whether they have relationship with somebody other than their husband. We were embarrassed, our investigators were embarrassed, but we trained them, and because there was because this information was quite important in studies of HIV and AIDS, so we had to ask this question. Do not use leading questions. What is leading question? That the question itself leads to some answer. Example, most sex workers in the world experience violence from their clients. You have suggested something, maybe this is right, but you have suggested something, and then you ask, have you also experienced violence from your clients? This is a leading question. Try to avoid such questions. Avoid asking for more than one information in a single question. For example, do not ask, do you and your husband want another child? Maybe a woman wants, maybe both want, maybe only husband wants. Imagine that if the answer is yes, do you and your husband want another child? It is not clear who wants, and if the answer is no, again it is not clear who does not want. Maybe husband does not want, maybe wife does not want, maybe both of them do not want. Do not ask two questions in the same question, then analysis and interpretation of the responses will be difficult. If I ask you, or if I ask somebody, is he a nationalist and uncorruptible person? Are you a nationalist and uncorruptible person? Now, nationalism is one thing, corruption is another thing. Somebody may be a nationalist, but corrupt. Somebody may not have very strong nationalist sense, but may be honest. So, do not mix up two questions or three questions in the same question. Watch out for ambiguous wordings. Ask yourself whether your words are vehicle of communication. You code some meaning in them and your respondent decode. Whether your respondents are decoding the same meaning in your words which you code in them. So, which method of family planning you or your husband use? There is an error of writing here. Which method of family planning you or your husband use? This and your is extra. Is a better question than which method of family planning do you use? Because do you use is ambiguous. If the answer is, suppose woman is not using any method, but husband is using. So, from the program point of view, they are users of the method. It does not matter whether male method is being used or female method is being used. They are the present users, current users. So, if the question is which method do you use and the answer is I am not using any method, it does not mean that the couple is not using any method. So, ambiguous words need to be avoided. Do not overload the interview schedule. Some students have a tendency, some researchers have a tendency of making a thick questionnaire, and sometimes they think that let us collect, when we are anyway going to collect data, let us collect as much data on the subject as possible. Some of these data we may use in writing PhD thesis or in writing the research report, and some data can be used later. Try to avoid that kind of tendency. Remember that your respondents or subjects do not have unlimited time to respond to your questions. Normally, a questionnaire should take 45 minutes to 1 hour, not more. And do not ask unnecessary questions. Actually, I tell students that after making your questionnaire, before you finalize it, you also decide about what kind of tables and statistical analysis you are going to use in your research report or PhD thesis. You will find that there are lots of questions or several parts of the questionnaire which you are not going to use. Then why ask them? Avoid them. Then the issue of optional wording. A good example of asking question: where you or anyone living here with you attacked or beaten up during the past year? Did he or she report the attack to the police? Very clear. Bad example. What do you like the best about this neighborhood? We are interested in anything like houses, the people, the parks, or whatever. This question, like houses, people, parks, or whatever, undermines the principle of standardized interviewing. Same questions should be asked in the same order and with such wordings that they are decoded by all your subjects, all your respondents exactly in the same way, and these questions should not carry different impressions in the minds of different people. Include all questions necessary to provide sufficient information. The rule I am telling you, that make tables, draw tables, blank tables before you finalize your questionnaire. In making tables, you find that, oh, this table 5.3 has these data, but to explain this table, I would need some data, some other data, some more information which I have not collected in the questionnaire. So, you add another question. So, include all questions which are necessary to provide sufficient information, but do not ask unnecessary questions. Also, there have been lot of researches on wordings, orders, and various other aspects of questions, and there are some rules like start with the easier questions, easier, impersonal, or not so sensitive questions. In most of the cases, I find that in sociological surveys, we begin with questions related to identity. These days, questions on name, etc., are made optional. If somebody does not want to reveal his identity or her identity, there is no harm. You are interested in the issue that you have in your hand and patterns. You are not interested in any individual. You are not interested in socio-economic, demographic and personality or other types of data of specific individuals. You are going to study macro or meso level patterns. Start with easy questions. So, generally questions related to identity, Then socio-economic demographic questions, like you can ask age, marital status, religion, caste, education first, and come to substantive issues of the study a little later. And among the issues also you can ask the sensitive or personal type of questions toward the end, and also give freedom to your respondents. If they are not interested in responding to your question, they need not respond, and the interview can be stopped on their request. Ask all respondents each question in exactly the same way. Do not interpret, do not use different words, do not ask your question, do not try to interpret the question. Actually, enough care has to be exercised in forming the questionnaire, so that you do not require any interpretation of the questions in the field, that the questions should be such that they can be easily understood by your respondents. In case the question is to be translated into more than one languages, sometimes yes, you may require to translate in a study involving different states of India. You may require your questionnaire to be translated into different languages, Hindi, Bengali, Tamil. So, in that case, translation and back translation both are important. Otherwise, how would you know that the question translated into Telugu carries the same meaning to Telugu speaking people as the question in English for researchers community. Back translation should be done by persons who are not familiar with the original wording of the questionnaire. Pre-test questionnaire in the actual field situation on at least 30 to 50 respondents. A common mistake which I have noticed among some PhD students is that suppose they conduct a pilot study on 30, and later on for their PhD they collect data from 300 more. Then they include data from these 30 also in the main study and say that their sample size was 330. No, that is wrong. The pilot data or the pilot study is used for very specific purposes, maybe for checking whether your questionnaire is working or not, whether order of questions is okay, whether people are comfortable. Maybe you can do some statistical analysis and see whether there are some questions which are leading to same answer, they can be dropped, or there are difficulties of understanding in some questions, they can be dropped, or for estimates of means and variances which you can utilize for estimating sample size. So, there are different purposes, but pilot study is a pilot study. Do not combine data of the pilot study with the data of the main study. Be prepared for more than pre-test. Suppose after pre-testing you make changes in 10 questions. Is it not important to check whether these new 10 questions or new wordings of these 10 questions are okay in the field? You may require another pilot study. That pilot study you need not do on 50 respondents. You may do that study on 25 respondents, but repeat kind of pilot study is also required sometime. Pre-test should be completed before training of the interviewers. So, interviewers are trained in the final questionnaire, final interview schedule. Each interview should be followed by debriefing, in which interview ask about respondents' understanding of the question for your feedback, for reflection on your questions. Each interview, let me repeat, each interview should be followed by debriefing, in which interviewer asks about respondents' understanding of the question. The debriefing is quite important. Sometimes your respondents may have some very interesting feedback on your questionnaire, on your way of asking question, on place of asking question, timing, or they may have to say something extra. So, this debriefing session can, or they may have some questions which you may not like to answer in the beginning of the survey, so that your survey is not distorted, you can answer such questions later. Study some good questionnaire, very important, before proceeding to develop one. Where possible, separate questions for different subgroups may be asked. Use lot of go to, skip to, probe, if none, record 0, do not read out the options, record the most important region, ask about each separately. These types of terms, phrases are very important. Otherwise, if you look at NFHS 4 interview schedule, it is so thick that as an interviewer or as a respondent, you will be afraid of answering to that. But when you look at go to, skip to, etc., or probe more information, more in-depth information, that makes the questionnaire perfect, because all questions are not to be asked to all the people, and some extra information may be required in explaining some response of the person. Incomplete wording, in place of putting age, ask what was your age on the last birthday. If you simply write age, some people will give exact birthday, some people will write age in years, completed years, some people will write years and months. So in place of just writing age and colon, ask what was your age on the last birthday. That is a better question, complete. What is better? I would ask you to rate different features of your neighborhood as very good, good, fair or poor. Please think carefully about each item as I read it. Public school, parks and others. Or I am going to ask you to rate different features of your neighborhood. I want you to think carefully about your answers. How would you rate feature? Would you say very good, good, fair or poor? What is better? Think and you decide. Small differences in the way of asking question matter. Avoid poorly defined terms. I am more concerned about this issue, so I am repeating. Poorly defined terms, for example, do you favor a law on HIV? What kind of law? What is the purpose of that law? It is not clear. It is not well defined question, favor a law on HIV. Do you mean that something related to ending discrimination about people living with HIV, or do you mean a law to provide facilities, law to provide facilities on the part of government, antiretroviral therapy or something, or testing, or it should be a law that whenever a health worker comes to know about a case of HIV, then he should be compulsorily taken to voluntary testing center, or what kind of, or law that such people will not be given a job in any government organization. What kind of, so the term law is not clear. A law that does not discriminate against them, or a law that they should be debarred from jobs, or a law about facility, it is not clear. So, different people may interpret this question differently and come up with different types of answers in which you may not be interested. Did someone ever talk to you about family planning? What? You think that by asking this question, you are trying to measure the level of awareness, but the answer may be such that it has nothing to do with the level of awareness. Did someone ever talk to you about family planning? What did one talk about family planning? If somebody talked about that there is a lot of corruption in family planning, this is not the answer in which you are interested. Are you satisfied with the local doctor? What do you mean by satisfaction? what kind of answer you are looking for. Did you have relationship with someone other than your, what kind of relationship may be physical, emotional, sexual, somebody may be your colleague, co-worker. So, there are different types of relationships. What do you mean? If you mean a sexual relationship, then ask specifically about that. Are you happy with the administration? Happiness means what? Are you happy? Are you in good terms? Or administration is efficient, effective, honest? What do you want to ask? Do you favor the rights of MSM? What rights? Men having sex with men. What kind of rights? So, these questions are not clear and their answers will be confusing, sometimes irrelevant, unexpected, or such that you are not interested in those answers. Misleading don't know. It may mean that the don't know, don't take it less seriously. The respondent don't know can mean several things. It may mean that the respondent is unwilling to do the work required to answer the question, or that she really does not know. Sometimes it may mean that the respondent really does not know, that is why saying don't know. Sometimes it may mean something else. Think about the issue of open-ended and closed-ended questions. I think as far as possible, or in descriptive and diagnostic studies, closed-ended questions are better. For exploratory studies, open-ended questions may be better. Open-ended permit unanticipated answers, but real views, and respondents have the opportunity to answer in their own words. So, this unanticipated answer is a good thing actually. It leads to your holistic understanding of something, integrated, comprehensive understanding. In close-ended, you will get the kind of answers you have already hypothesized, but they are reliable. Close-ended questions give you reliable answers by the respondents. Reliable interpretation by the researcher therefore is more possible and eliminates analytically useless kind of responses in which you are not, or vague or irrelevant answers. Then sometimes your questions are such that they involve recall, retrospective surveys. One of our students was saying that she wants to study whether consumption pattern has changed after reforms, and she was telling that she will compare consumption pattern in Calcutta which prevailed 30 years back in somebody's life before the reform and now. And I was asking, do you expect that people remember how much of what they consumed 30 years ago, whether the accuracy of that information and accuracy of what they are consuming and how much today, whether the two pieces of information can actually be compared. There is a lot of recall lapse. I do not know what my income was 30 years ago. I only broadly know that I came to this organization in that year at this salary, around basic salary. I do not know my take home or gross at that. I do not know how many tubes of say Colgate I use or our family use, and then family is not same. Family 30 years ago or family now. At that time we did not have children, now we have children. So, many questions may suffer from, I remember an interesting demographic example that often in demographic surveys, average number of children in age group 45 to 49 was actually less than in 40 to 44, and this interesting discrepancy was explained in terms of recall lapse. Reduce the reference period, ask more questions, give second chance to think, re-interview the respondents, ask people to keep a diary are the ways of minimizing recall errors. Recall errors, reference period in national sample survey makes a big difference to consumption pattern and therefore to ultimate estimation of poverty levels. You take a reference period of 1 week or reference period of 30 days or reference period of 1 year, that matters in reported consumption of different items. Sometimes it makes more sense to have a reference period of 1 year for some, 30 days for other items and 7 days for some other items. Then minimize a sense of judgment. Social desirability is another important issue. If you ask, are you an honest person, due to social desirability, they are more likely to say yes. Are you in favor of a small family, social desirability, they will say yes. Use self-administered questions and maintain confidentiality, then only true answers will come. If you maintain confidentiality, then only people can reveal their true income, otherwise they may report that income which they are reporting to income tax office. Length of questionnaire should be optimum, all your important questions should be there, but unimportant irrelevant questions should be avoided. People do not have unlimited time. Interview or filling the questionnaire should not last more than an hour. I said 45 minutes to 1 hour. If due to some reason the nature of the study is such that you need to talk to your, you need to interview your respondents for say 2 hours, divide your meeting into 2 parts. So, in one meeting you ask half of the questionnaire or one part or one questionnaire, and in the second meeting administer the second part of the questionnaire, not in the same meeting. Then there are other issues, reverse coding. Sometime for getting a more reliable response, the direction of question can be changed, and such questions can be mixed with other questions randomly. At the time of coding, you have to do reverse coding. What it means, if you are using Likert scale for something 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and for some questions 1 means most satisfied, 5 least. For some other questions it can be 1 for least and 5 for most. This will neutralize people's tendency to give answers in a certain direction or to give answers without showing an interest, just to ward off the investigators some answers. But if you ask questions in such a way that 2 different orders of answers are maintained, then later on you do the reverse coding and you get more reliable responses. Pilot studies, Google Monkey, these days many students are using Google Monkey, Google Forms, that is good. You can reach more people, anonymous people, and I know some very good, I have been examiner to some very good MTech and PhD thesis which were based on surveys through Google Monkey or Google survey forms. You can send them through emails, or you can throw them openly to all kinds of respondents. The only problem that you cannot control who is responding, who is not responding, but you can have a wider reach of that. So, in this I wanted to tell you about tools of data collection, and especially in survey. What I have said, there are no final answers to these questions, but you have to be careful about the length of the questionnaire or interview schedule, whether all relevant, important, necessary questions have been asked, whether there are some irrelevant questions, what should be the order of the questions, what type of questions should be asked first, what type of questions should be asked later, whether you should go for reverse coding for some questions to get more reliable results. Your questions, your words should be simple, precise, unambiguous, and you should conduct a pilot study. If necessary, if you are making some significant changes in your questionnaire, then another second pilot study may be required. And I will end saying that before finalizing your questionnaire, you also make the tables that you are going to include in your thesis, what kind of data you are going to produce. That will help you a lot in revising your question. This is a point which you will not find in books, but I find it quite useful if students can think of their analysis plan and what kind of graphs, charts, data they are going to show. That helps a lot in designing a questionnaire also. Thank you.